President Trump is the decision maker.
Yeah.
He is the only one making policy. Everyone else is almost afraid to say what they think we should do in case they are saying something different than what Trump later comes out and decides. So everyone is being extra cautious.
If we look at things then from an economic perspective, because President Trump keeps going back to that, and I can understand it from his business perspective, and you're putting America into that strongest position. The EU's GDP is about $20.3 trillion. US, $30+ trillion. Russian economy is $2.2 trillion. Why is he seemingly putting more pressure on the EU than with that could be a much bigger trading partner and benefit a lot from, or could hurt America economically, and seem to be sort of placating Russia a lot? Is this down to trying to force Europe to step up and pay for what it's taken from the United States for so long?
Right. There's a couple of things. The example that you just gave, Trump would use to say Europe has all this money and they're not pulling their share of the load. And so they should be doing more. And with Putin's the guy who started this war. So you got to work with Putin to get him to stop it. That would be Trump's perspective. Let me broaden out just a little bit to say I don't think that Trump has a clearly defined strategy for how to end the war. He operates on instinct, and he sees Putin's behavior, Europe's behavior, Ukraine's behavior, and he's, I think, reacting with a lot of instinct to how to try to push everybody to a peace agreement. When I take a look at what that amounts to, I see kind of four consistent themes. There is immediate ceasefire, so you stop the killing. There is what Trump would call reciprocity, so Ukraine is paying its own way rather than getting taxpayer money. There is deterrence, meaning you've got to have some way of preventing the war from breaking out again, preventing Putin from attacking again once you have a ceasefire. And you've got to have better burden sharing. You want Europe to do more. And this is where Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron are putting together European security assurances, European reassurance force for Ukraine. So these pieces are all out there, and you see him trying to push all of them forward. I think it probably will work. I think that by the end of this year, we probably will have a ceasefire. That's mainly because of the economy in Russia, where Putin will have to do that. And I don't think we're going to have a full-blown agreement because Putin will never agree to anything reasonable.
Yeah, it's fascinating what's happening there. But again, if you zoom this out one step further, if President Trump is working on instinct with this, is he doing the same in the Middle East? Is he doing the same in Southeast Asia? And then we've got Doge attacking internal politics inside the United States. Any one of those issues for a very, very experienced government would be a major issue and would occupy a whole of their time. If you look at his top team, they're relatively inexperienced at that level of government. Do you think he's got enough horsepower to be able to continue to survive on instinct, or is there someone behind that with a bigger plan?
No. So the bottom line to your question, President Trump is the decision maker. He is the only one making policy. Everyone else is almost afraid to say what they think we should do in case they are saying something different than what Trump later comes out and decides. So everyone is being extra cautious. You do have some very smart, competent people in the administration who are seasoned, like Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, or Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor, John Ratcliffe at the CIA, also very good. Bessent, big Wall Street career and at Treasury. So you have some, solid pairs of hands here. But Trump is the real decider on this. And what I'd say there's some consistency in the way he is dealing with the various regional conflicts that you've talked about. Take the Middle East. He is trying to push back on Iran, but he wrote a letter to the Supreme Leader, and he's saying, get rid of the nuclear idea and we can work together. So he's trying to push and pull with the.
Of course, he talked about that with Vladimir Putin in his infamous phone call.
Yes, he did.
That you don't give Iran the ability to destroy Israel.
That's right. Yeah. So that is a part of it. He's pushing back on Iranian proxies, Hamas and the Houthis, for example, putting pressure on Iran, threatening Iran, but also giving them a way out. And in the case of China, he is very tough rhetoric on China, trying to focus on building U.S. strength so we are in a better position to compete with China economically and militarily, and trying to avoid confrontation directly with China as well.
And this is where I have a theory.
Okay, let's hear your theory.
In this, we keep hearing this emphasis on rare earth minerals deal in Ukraine, and then we've got Greenland and J.D. Vance's visit to Greenland, and the talk of we have to have Greenland, and I went and did some research and pulled out the 1951 treaty, the Defence of Greenland Agreement between the United States and the Kingdom of Denmark, signed on the 27th of April, and which effectively turns around and says that the US can station and base as many troops and as much military capability as it wants in Greenland and make a unilateral decision to do that. Denmark can come and put military officers in with it, but the US has got free rights to do that. Yeah. But it's minerals, rare earths in there. And if we note that in rare earth minerals, China currently controls about 90% of all the rare earth mineral mines that are economically viable. And I know that in the past, the US Department of Defense has raised this at different levels as a concern because of the requirement for US defense industry. Is this all about China?
I think there is, yes, competition with China, establishing U.S. strategic independence for military, for economic purposes, for technology, for space, you name it. Strategic independence of the United States, and that does rest on a lot of these rare earth minerals and things. So that is very important. And of course, we talk about that with Ukraine, talk about that with China, Greenland, etc. That does not explain the rationale, does not give a rationale for saying the U.S. has to control Greenland or have to take over Greenland. As you pointed out, we already can do whatever we want to do. And Denmark is very supportive of that. We used to have 17 military bases on Greenland, and it was a U.S. decision to pull them back. It can be a U.S. decision to go back in again. And Denmark will provide infrastructure and provide icebreakers and provide host nation support. So there's no reason why we need to put it in terms of control and ownership. And I think the reason people are saying it is because they simply don't know. And when you start to explain this and flesh this out, they get to see it. I think Vance's trip to Greenland may have been helpful in that respect, because I think he would have gotten a good briefing from the military up there. Here's what it is. The rare earths that exist in Greenland are under thousands of feet or hundreds of feet of ice. Not the easiest place to go extract. And the weather conditions are very severe. Much easier to do this in the US or in Ukraine or elsewhere. And I think that there's one other dimension to this when you talk about Greenland. It just plays to this nationalist base to be beating your chest and saying, we're going to make the United States bigger. It's that sort of locker room style emotion, not serious and not, I think, to be seriously pursued. And indeed, when it comes to security, where you have had China trying to establish a port in Greenland and more Chinese and Russian interest in the Arctic, it does make sense for the U.S. to strengthen its position in the Arctic and to do so together with Denmark.
Well, again, the rhetoric that we're hearing about Canada, about Greenland, and then about Panama as well. If you look at that, that's all trade routes from the Pacific round into the Atlantic and round to the US ports and bits and pieces. So there's a common theme there.
Yeah, well, Panama is actually more interesting and more serious because President Trump pointed out that you have a company that is subject to Chinese pressure that controls the port facilities on both sides of the canal. So that's really rather concerning to him when that is of such strategic importance to the U.S. And as he likes to point out, we built it and we gave it to Panama, not to China. So he is very serious about getting control of the Panama Canal or reestablishing control of the canal and the operations. And the Chinese, responding to that, have indeed put pressure on Hutchison as a company not to sell this to BlackRock. So it appears that Trump was onto something. Canada, completely different. Completely different. I think this was personal personally directed at Justin Trudeau
Yeah.
to troll him.
Well, and Canada doesn't spend 2% of GDP, and
That's
it's not just a NATO member; it's a Five Eyes member as well.
Yes,
and therefore that will avert President Trump,
and
rightly so.
yeah, well, yeah, no, in terms of defense spending and Canada's contribution to the common defense, he will look at that as free riding for sure. But there's no way that Canada becomes the 51st state. I mean, it's just trolling.
But we look at the language that's coming out aimed at a territory that is under the control of another NATO member. Stick your old ambassador to NATO hat on. What will you be saying in the sidelines to the other ambassadors about what's going on and the US commitment to NATO?
Yeah, this is all, you have to understand where Trump is coming from. You may not like it or agree with it, but where he's coming from is a belief that the United States has not been treated fairly by Europe. We've paid disproportionately for Europe's defense, while Europe has paid Russia for energy and invested in its own social welfare state, not contributed enough to its own defense. So he is determined to change that. And if I were advising colleagues at NATO, let's set a high and realistic target that can actually be achieved for defense spending in Europe. 2% is not enough anymore with this war going on. My guess is that we're going to end up around 3.5%. And if that is agreed at the NATO summit in June, and if there are serious plans for reaching it, like Poland is doing it, Denmark is close but not quite, the Baltic states are there, others are not. But if we can have a goal and serious plans to achieve that goal, I think that's the way to both deal with Trump and strengthen NATO in the process.
So you think that he'll continue with his support to NATO, or is the US focus elsewhere?
Yeah, no, he will definitely continue U.S. support to NATO. He's just not going to say it that way.
Yeah.
Because his intention is to keep the pressure on so that Europe does its part. The moment the U.S. eases up on the pressure, everybody exhales and everybody goes back to doing what they were doing.
Thank you for watching another episode of Frontline with me, Philip Ingram. If you want more great content, please sign up for Times Radio membership, and then you can leave comments and ask questions, which we'll endeavour to answer in other shows. And if you want to be kept up to date with day-to-day events, please tune into Times Radio. Thank you.